and good morning. My name is Colin Dills. This is my instructing assignment for the EMS Level B Instructor course. My teaching environment or the group of students that I would be addressing in this would be my EMT students at the college that I teach at. Normally we have a class of about 21 students max. I think this coming up class is at 18 currently. I also instruct in other environments, but in this particular video that will be the group that I would be instructing to. So good morning again. Today's chapter is going to be on scene size up. I skip through these first couple slides here and get into it. So the first thing that we want to do is kind of what we've been driving into you guys this entire course, which has been safety. Every time we start anything, anytime we start a scenario, a skill, first things we make you say, BSI, scene safe. That goes into everything, and we have that be the first thing that we address for a reason. If we're not safe, we can't help anybody. The very first thing that we worry about is our safety. Then I worry about my partner's safety, and then the patient's safety. So scene safety is going to be the first thing that we check. And then, like I already addressed, we make you say scene safe, BSI. Second thing we're going to do, those standard precautions. Most of the time we're going to have our gloves on before the call. In today's day and age, there's more things that are being addressed, such as face masks, gowns. Depending on what the call is, we may have to take higher levels of PPE. The scene may be unsafe to the point where we need a level of PPE higher than what we carry. When we addressed it in the PPE chapter and we talked about the different levels, you guys saw the hazmat suits, the turnout gear such as firemen wear. There may be, if it's a carbon monoxide type call, if there's some kind of gas in the air, we may not even have the proper PPE to enter that scene. And that's when we get into calling additional resources, which we'll address here shortly. We're going to talk about determining the mechanism of injury or the nature of illness. When we get into your skill sheets and we get into actually performing our patient assessments, all of this is really going to tie in together, so it's very important that you pay attention to it now. These are things that you're going to become very familiar with, and you are going to have memorized to the point where you're going to be saying it in your sleep, hopefully. We want to know, though, what injured my patient or what got my patient sick. That sets the tone for how I'm going to start my assessment, what kind of questions I'm going to ask. We're always going to ask the same standard questions that we're going to address, these acronyms that we've been teaching you, such as SAMPLE and OPQRST. But if I can narrow that down into a field, sometimes is my first question going to be, can you rate your chest pain? Can you describe it? Or is it going to be, how long has your shortness of breath been going on? Has anything made that shortness of breath worse? Do you have a history of that? And I can start to narrow down those questions when I'm trying to get into my differential diagnosis. Next thing I need to know, how many patients do I have? We go into thinking about a call, and that starts with our training here, as having just one patient. When we set you guys up for a scenario, most of the time it's 18-year-old female, complaining of shortness of breath, something like that. We set you guys up with one patient to take care of. In the real world, you're going to have more than one patient sometimes. You're going to have 2, 3, you may even get into MCI levels, and we'll address that in the MCI chapter, but you might not always just have that one patient. And that gets into the next, deciding what additional resources may be necessary. I already addressed, maybe we need a level of PPE that we don't have. Maybe the scene is not safe and we need LEO to make it safe for us, or we need the fire department to come in and get rid of whatever may be there, carbon monoxide, fire, smoke, that's making that scene unsafe. Sometimes you may have it where the scene is not going to become safe and you have to have the patient brought to you. Again, we're going to need additional resources that can enter that unsafe scene and bring us our patient. And then if we have more than one patient, how many can we take care of? Am I on a BLS crew? Can I only take care of 2 BLS, maybe 3 BLS patients? Is there an ALS patient there? Do I need to have ALS intercept come? Do I need to have an ALS transport? Am I even transport? These are questions that you're going to learn that you need to ask yourself when you approach a scene. So the only predictable thing about emergencies is that they're unpredictable. Emergencies are not standard things. This is something that's changed. People don't just, well, most people don't just get up and say, I'm going to call 911 today. Most people to call if something has occurred that is outside of the normal. It's become their life, their scene, because that's the scene that they were in, has become unpredictable. Something changed. We don't know what that is, okay, until we get there and we figure it out. And then even when we get there and we think we have it figured out, we have to have our heads on a swivel and be prepared for things to change. So I want you guys to get into the habit of not only asking yourself, is the scene safe when you're on your way there, but is the scene remaining safe? And we'll talk about that more later on. Some of the things we need to look for, some of the different scenes we may be on, this slide is addressing here, like an MBA type scene. So we need to look and listen for other emergency units approaching. That's a good bullet point there. But not only that, look at absorbing traffic flow. A lot of times you've seen the videos on Facebook, YouTube, Instagrams, what have you, of people actually hitting emergency apparatus. People are drawn to flashing lights. All of a sudden you get these rubberneckers that, oh, what's going on over there? Well, when you're turning your head, a lot of times they turn their steering wheel the same way. It's not the people that aren't paying attention all the time. You do have the people that are texting, talking on their phone, Instagramming, Snapchatting, what have you. But sometimes people are looking directly right at the emergency scene and turn right into it just because they're staring at it. You don't know who's behind that wheel. You don't know if they're under the influence. You don't know what they're experiencing. Our safety vests, our sirens, our emergency lights, they only do so much. You really, really have to keep your head on a swivel, especially when you're on scene that's near a road, interstate, highway. Look for signs of a collision-related power outage. What this is talking about is if you're driving up to the scene and you're noticing maybe it's nighttime, maybe it's in a commercial area and there's street signs out front, there's open signs in the window, and you're noticing like, hey, the power's out in this block. Start looking around for down power lines. They may have hit a power pole. Those power lines could be under the car. That's another danger that we need to look out for that we're not going to address. That goes back into calling for those additional resources. We're going to have to call for the power company to come out and make that scene safe for us. And then look for smoke in the direction of the collision scene. A lot of times people will call in the collisions, the MVAs, and be like the car's on fire, and it is just the powder that's encased inside the airbags. But every now and then we do get a vehicle fire involved in a collision scene. Things are breaking, things are sparking, fuel's leaking. So look out for that. Again, additional resources. If we're going by ourselves to an MVA and that's the wrong card in your jurisdiction and you're noticing that, hey, there's a column of smoke from coming over there, I probably need to call the fire department. I only have a fire extinguisher on my rig that's made for me to protect my rig. I'm not a firefighter. I don't have turnouts. Let me get those additional resources coming. That's why that's up on the top and why that's very important. So when we're getting within sight of the scene, some of the things we're going to look for. We're going to look for clues of escaped hazardous materials. We're going to look for collision victims on or near the road. Let's talk about your ejections, your motorcycle accidents. I've had it where I had my motorcycle victim in the middle of the road, and about another mile down the road was his motorcycle. We didn't even know. Like, I had the patient transported, packaged in the helicopter and gone. And then afterwards I'm like, hey, where did he come from? And luckily a bystander was like, well, the motorcycle kept going and it's about a mile, 2 miles down the road there. So you can see how if we rolled up on scene and saw his motorcycle, maybe we needed to look around. We didn't have bystanders to help us to point out where he was. Pretty much summing this up, the victim isn't, or the patient victim might not always be where the incident is. Look for smoke not seen at a distance. Same thing we just covered. Maybe fire hasn't, reached its later stages and it's a incipient phase and it hasn't really taken off yet. Again, just because we determined the scene was safe when we were arriving or we were preparing to arrive doesn't mean it will stay safe. And we already covered the utility poles and down wires. Just again, I'm going to say this to you guys so many times throughout this course. Keep your heads on a swivel. Alright, and then when we get within sight of the scene, We need to be alert for persons walking along the side of the road. Look out for pedestrians. Let's not make another patient while we're arriving on scene. And then a lot of times we'll be communicating with command if there are other units on scene. But if for some reason you don't have radio contact with them, maybe they arrived on scene, what have you. The cops, we don't always have radio contact with them. Watch for their signals. They may be avoiding you around an obstacle. They may have already designated a safe place for you to park, especially the police officers in our county. We have fire police. They're really good at controlling the traffic and doing that. And just watch for signals from them and communicate with command as you're arriving on scene. Again, what I just voiced, communicate with command. That's generally going to be who's in charge on scene. Although it may be a police officer who may be arriving on the highway having FHP there. Don your appropriate protective apparel. If your agency issues you bunker coats, you want to have those on MVAs. If you're on the interstate, highway, in large crowds, make sure you have your reflective vest on over your coat. And then it says sniff for odors. Just be aware if you start smelling something funky. It's not saying that you should go up in the scene and start sniffing around. That's how you're going to become a patient as well. But if you open your door and you're like, oh, that doesn't smell right, more than just burning rubber or something, you know, you're smelling almonds, something that's not right, like smells like a chemical. Maybe we back up out of that scene, call in those additional resources, and make sure that scene is safe for us. So we want to establish a danger zone. You guys have heard the term, I've talked about it before, the cold, warm, hot. You're always going to have those around every emergency scene, especially when we're talking about MVAs. If we don't have the proper equipment, our bunker gear or our dual cert gear, our agency doesn't issue those, we don't need to be up there around that wreckage. Again, let the people that have the proper PPE bring those patients to us. Even when there are no apparent hazards, keep your hand on a swivel. Watch out for airbags. Sometimes you'll have, the airbags will have their sensors in the bumper and stuff, and they may not have gone off with the initial crash, so they may be delayed. Sometimes you gotta just be careful and cognizant of that. Look in there. Have the airbags already deployed? Oh, they haven't? Okay, I'm gonna look out for that. I'm gonna let everybody else know too. Hey, just be careful when you're leaning in here. We don't have airbag deployment yet. I know those sensors are in the bumper and there's lots of damage up there. Just everyone be careful. Watch out for fuel spills. Fuel spill may not be immediate. There may be a small leak. You could be standing somewhere next to the car 1 minute and then look down at your feet and notice that you're in a pile of diesel, gasoline, oil, what have you. Keep your head on a swivel. Be aware. Look at these numbers that they're talking about. Staying 50 feet away from the car. This isn't necessarily for you, but also for bystanders, people that aren't involved in the incident. We want to separate them, keep them away from that scene. And when fuel has spilled, 100 feet away. Excuse me. When a vehicle is on fire, we're going to keep everybody 100 feet away in all directions. When wires are down, we want to keep one full span of those wires. So however far apart the poles are, or however far apart the wires come down, that's how far back we want to be. When a hazardous material is involved, we're going to reference our emergency response guidebook. I know you guys haven't really gotten into these yet, and we're going to cover them later on, but it's a nice little book that's put together. It's called an ERG. They update them every few years. The 2024 one just came out. There's also an app that you can get on your phone, and it has pretty much every hazardous material, placard, ways to identify things that aren't placard, and tells you how to handle these scenes, how far you need to evacuate, who you need to call, how to handle that material, and it's a very, very good reference for those of us that respond to these scenes. Crime scenes and acts of violence. So evaluate for the threat of violence. Even when LEO is there or the cops are there and they've made the scene safe, things can change. People can become violent again. When we're walking up to a house, maybe we didn't suspect violence. Listen for these things. Are we hearing fighting or loud voices inside the house? Are there weapons or that are visible or in use? Do we have signs of alcohol or drug use? Unusual silence, or sometimes we'll have responded to an address before, or even have CAD notes in our computer coming up or given to us by the dispatcher telling us there's been knowledge of prior violence. So just think about it. Although any call can represent any call can present a potential safety hazard. What type of calls might pose the highest threats of potential violence? Yeah, those are all good answers. And again, that's why we want to keep our heads on a swivel. We want to look around. Even if we've determined a scene is safe, I'm going to sound like a broken record. It can become unsafe again at any time. Our standard precautions, we want to keep our body substance isolation. We're going to continue to repeat that, and we're going to always make sure that we have our personal protective equipment available. Even if we don't initially think that we need to put it on, you want to have it nearby, know where it is, be ready to don that equipment.